So one last thing on the COVID data context. We've got a quiz coming up here. So which disease disproportionately affects older people and has a 120-day mortality rate of 1%? And by that, that means within 120 days, if you have it, you are deceased. Okay, everyone's going with the flu. All right, I'm going to kill it in a couple seconds. No one picked other, by the way. Everyone was pretty confident because I framed the choices with 4. So, looks like flu is number 1, heart attack was number 2, dementia was number 3, and cancer was number 4. Here is the answer. Turning 75, just being alive at 75 means you have a 120 mortality rate of 1%. A little mind-boggling. And this was part of my research back at the end of March that I was sharing with people involved in this conversation. I looked at the actual...
Kevin, for the record, someone did note, hey, that's not really a disease.
Well,
there we go. Good point.
Good point. Yes, that's good.
It shows us how easy it is to skew the data. There we go.
Yeah, that was deliberate. It was a little...
It was a trick. Well,
yeah, it was a trick. But no, it's for context, right? And by the way, the poll is clear now, right?
Yes, it is.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so I pulled up the actuarial data, and this is actually what just being alive looks like. Put yourself in a bracket. It's dramatic. And in fact, if you look at this graph relative to the COVID case fatality graph, the blue line and this line, they're really similar, actually. Not totally similar. This is logarithmic, which you probably all learned about because of the pandemic. But you can actually just divide one by the other. And if you look by age, the increased risk, so going from just being alive to getting COVID and then are you alive in 30 days, is an interesting story. It turns out that, and the data is super noisy, but the youngest might have the highest increased risk. Still low overall, similar to these. And sure enough, it's that older group where there is an increase. But now we're talking about risks that aren't ridiculously off the chart, at least for the younger folks. So for context, motorcycle risk is 35 times higher than car driving. Some people do it. They assume that risk. Same with farming, fishing, or logging, where you get in that same range, 7x to 28x. So actually, it turns out that those increased risk are not that unreasonable for younger people, kind of crazy people that drive motorcycles. I had a scooter in grad school. So just to be clear, though, that risk thing, it's still not just the flu. And seasonal flu, we've talked about 0.1 is the infection fatality rate. As of Monday, we already had 17,000 deaths in New York out of 8.4 million in New York City, which is a 0.2 population fatality rate. And obviously, you can't do lower than that as an infection fatality rate. In fact, they have done an antibody test, and it seems like 0.5 is their best estimate right now. And if you look at even a simple crude number like excess deaths in Europe, you can see a spike. You see seasonal illnesses every winter, every year, and then boom, and that's a real thing. So, yeah, 3 to 5 times as deadly as the flu. And then one other thing, 2 times as many targets. Turns out that 50% of people actually get a vaccination for the flu every year, which means there's only 150 million, which actually means there's only another 10% before you get to that herd immunity, roughly 10 to 20%. And it is actually deadlier for older age groups. And this is how we failed. The good data actually told us to overprotect the elderly and the sick. And in the US, 42% of deaths have been in nursing homes, even though it's only 0.6 of the population. And it's not just us. You've heard stories about people being sent to nursing homes sick. Canada, Sweden, others. Canada, it's 81% of deaths, 1.2 of the population. So jurisdictions, unfortunately, miss this data in context, and it costs lives. So, yeah, the wrong data or context can lead to COVID missteps and, in the community input, bad agency decisions.